The Violent Blood Like Tar is a recent crime comic from Image, written by Ed Brisson and art by Adam Gorham. This happened to be one of the trades I picked up on a whim during my trip to HeroesCon 2017, and was a good opportunity to test out a non-high-profile Image title. After all, the best way to determine the strength of a company is not with the quality of their heavy hitters, but to instead look at the depth of their roster on the whole. Fortunately, The Violent has proven itself to be yet another solid title in Image's library, with a focused narrative for those who are looking for something a bit different from the usual crime fare. One of the things you have to understand about the crime genre is there's a lot of it. Because of that, it's very hard for new voices in the genre to stand out from established crime legends like Brian Azzarello, Ed Brubaker, and Greg Rucka, amongst others. More often than not, their comics are the ones new readers will go for if they're looking to try out the genre. The Violent in some ways suffers from this, but in others is able to distinguish itself from the pack. This is most notable with its tone. A good portion of stories from the genre's big guns have varying degrees of grit, but there's also a style to it where it's fun watching the bad guys be the bad guys. The main characters aren't the best of people more often than not, but we generally have fun with them as they progress through the plot. And the violence is usually stylized to where it can either function as entertainment, dark humor, a visceral gut punch, or a combination of the three. The Violent is just a gut punch. It's not glorifying its violence or crime material in any way, effectively making it the antithesis to the stylized segment of the genre. This is very much a book about the realities of crime and the cyclical nature of those caught in its web. The story itself is about Mason, an ex-con who's on the straight and narrow, fresh out of prison after doing some time for breaking and entering. He has a loving wife, Becky, and a daughter, and he's doing everything he can not to fall back into that life. But it's so hard for them to stay above water. They're both working jobs, sure, but there aren't many opportunities out there for ex-felons and junkies. It becomes apparent early on that the life they've worked so hard at rebuilding is one bad break away from falling apart. The other shoe finally drops when Becky ODs on heroin and goes missing. That same night, Mason is arrested for child abandonment after an incident at a bar forces him to leave his child alone in a car at night. Their combined circumstances result in them losing custody of their daughter until they can prove to the state that they're suitable parents. This leads Mason on a path of self-destruction, first under the motive of finding his wife, and later regaining custody of his child. The first issue in particular does an excellent job of establishing the characters and their situation. They're likable and have sympathetic goals to where I want them to succeed, even though the odds are stacked against them. The atmosphere is positively bleak from the opening page, and only intensifies as Mason's options dwindle. This setting helps to add to Mason's desperation in going about his journey, and while I'll leave the ending vague for you to experience for yourself, his ending has a logical conclusion for the arc he goes on. This story is actually based in Canada, of all places, which caught my attention right away. If you were to think of gritty crime locales, Canada most likely doesn't come to mind first. Let's be honest, if you have a familiarity with the genre, it probably wouldn't even crack your top 10. But to Brisson's credit, he utilizes the location effectively. The Ministry of Children play a major role with the plot, determining that Mason and Becky's home environment is not suitable for a child, and take the kid away. Their presence is felt throughout the rest of the arc, and serves as an effective way to kickstart the leads to go on their respective character arcs. There's a ripple effect to the violence in this story, and it's portrayed as a harsh reality of the world, usually stemming from the desperation of the characters and ending with regret. The first moment where this takes shape is when Mason beats up the dealer who sold his wife drugs. He strikes the dealer in a standard response to the guy mouthing off about his wife, but that act has deadly consequences when the force of the punch smashes the dealer's head against the table, killing him instantly. Then, in an attempt to cover his tracks, Mason lets loose the dealer's hungry dog on the corpse to make it look like he was mauled to death. This becomes a trend throughout the story. Mason will choose to do a violent act, but now that he's resorted to violence, that mistake sets off a chain of consequences that plunge him deeper and deeper into the lifestyle that he fought so hard to stay away from at the beginning. Another of Brisson's strengths is with his characterization of Becky, who to my surprise was an intriguing character for her role in the story. Oftentimes when you have a lead character struggling to stay on the straight and narrow path, the female love interest tends to be a guiding light for the protagonist to strive towards. And Becky is that, but she also has her own level of darkness, dealing with her history of drug abuse and the bad blood she has with her neglectful mother. These elements help to flesh her out more than most female characters in that archetype. There's a symmetry between the art and dialogue here that makes it simple for new comic readers or experienced ones to enjoy. The creative team has a great handle on when to let the art speak for itself, and when to dig into a dialogue-driven scene with the characters. Their strong storytelling instincts result in a smooth reading experience that one can enjoy in one cover-to-cover sitting, making it ideal for the trade. This does work both ways, however. Due to how smooth this book is from issue to issue, this does have the potential for readers to clear through the trade much faster than you'd probably like. This results from the team's decision to exclude the issue's covers till the end of the trade. The covers themselves are fantastic at setting the tone for what's to come and should serve as a way for the reader to pause for a moment, take in what happened, and build anticipation for the next chunk of story. Without that divider, it feels like it could be mistaken for an OGN if you weren't paying attention to the natural cliffhanger points. As for the artwork, Adam Gorham is a fantastic complement to Brisson's grounded storytelling. His backgrounds look great, but in a grimy sense, and he also does a good job of not just drawing nice-looking people, but normal people. That's one of the telltale signs of a solid artist for me. It's the ability to draw someone who isn't a knockout supermodel, but a normal person. That can be tricky to ask of some artists, but he pulls it off nicely, utilizing expressive characters in various body types. His depictions of violence are gruesome and grounded in realism. Whether it's the visual of someone getting hit with a tire iron, or the after effects of a dog mauling, Gorham is not afraid to put the consequences of the violence right there in front of us to provoke a response. Now for a bit of an oddity when it comes to my comic reviews, I want to bring up the lettering for a moment. Ed Brisson also handled the lettering for this book on top of writing, and I just wanted to say he knocked it right out of the park. Lettering is usually something you don't bring up unless you find problems with it, but like I said, I had to give him credit. He really did a good job with this. Everything is spaced out nicely and digestible. There's no doubt his lettering is a major factor with how seamless the reading experience is, and even during the book's wordiest moments, it doesn't feel daunting to read like it potentially could in other books. His best lettering moment, I would say, is when he adds background elements into Mason's confrontation with the drug dealer. The dealer's dog is barking in the background of the conflict, making that scene much more tense. Little things like that are what elevate a good scene into a memorable one. However, when push comes to shove, The Violent is a good read that falls a bit short of greatness. There's something of an X factor missing from this book. It's not always quantifiable in discussions, but it's that extra element that keeps lingering in your mind after you've read it. Those books, movies, and games you recommend to people without a moment's thought, those picks will always have that advantage in the long run. Part of this feeling comes down to its ending. While I like Mason's conclusion, Becky's leaves something to be desired. Her ending made sense for her character arc, yet something feels missing in the page itself to give it that little extra impact. Perhaps they should have ended it with Mason's conclusion just to keep things more in line with their tone. The paper quality from Image is excellent as always. Most of the praise is the result of Image allowing the creative teams the freedom to design their books however they see fit, and it absolutely shows in the final product. I can't think of an Image book I've read in the last 3 to 5 years that's ever had bad paper quality. This book is going for $9.99 for 5 issues, which is a phenomenal deal, and to be honest, it's more than likely they're breaking even or maybe even losing money on this book in order for you to pick it up. In spite of these reservations, The Violent is still a solid read for its price point, and it's well worth your money. Just know what you're getting into. It might not be the most pleasant read if you're not into gritty crime comics, but it's an enthralling one for those willing to plunge their hands into the filth.